Alrighty, welcome to the AEM RSA's Med Student Mondays. This panel is the International Student Panel. Thank you for joining us. I really hope I'm not on mute right now. I'm Ava Omidvar. I'm the International Representative on the AEM RSA Medical Student Council. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to help or direct you in the proper direction because I'll be the first to admit when I don't know something, so don't worry. I'm not shy. Thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight. I really appreciate all the time and effort you all took out of your very hectic schedules to help guide the future generation of students and doctors. And I'm gonna start with Matt Carvey. If you could go around and introduce yourself and let us know what school you go to and where in the process you are, that would be wonderful. And then we'll start on all the questions right after that.
All right, hey guys, I'm Matt, currently a fourth year student through St. George's University, currently in Lincoln Medical Center in the Bronx right now. So just going through the ERAS process right now, however you want to say it. I'm Canadian, so we kind of say words differently. So yeah, happy to be here, happy to answer any questions relating to applications this season and how great that's going to be, so, okay.
Wonderful. I have Bruno next on my screen.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm currently doing EM residency over at the University of New Mexico. Sorry about the noise in the back. I did a program that was 2 years in Australia and then 2 years in New Orleans. It's called the UQ Auction Program. And yeah, there's not much more to it.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Mohammed, you are next.
All right, so my name is Mohammed Ali. And I'm currently a PGY1 at the University of Toledo, and I did my medical school at the American University of Beirut, Lebanon. That's it.
Thank you. And Tim, you are rounded up at the end with the strongest, okay? No pressure.
Last but not least, hi, I'm Tim Von Ogosi. I am also a fourth year studying at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. I'm also on a rotation right now at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So going through the ERAS process, just like Matthew is. So happy to answer questions about that and just medical schooling in general.
Wonderful. Thank you for introducing yourself. I also left out that I'm a St. George's University medical student in my clinical years. So that's how I know Matt. Sorry, Matt, you're stuck with me. Thank you all for joining us, really appreciate it. Why don't we just jump right in with the first question. It's gonna be medical school related. What made you decide to go to an international school?
I can take this one first if you want, guys. So again, my name is Matt. So I am from Canada. In a previous life, I guess I was a flight paramedic, just like Ava was, and kind of was at a crossroads or a tri-roads, whatever you want to call it, where you're kind of deciding, do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to go into more into flight medicine? What do you really want to do with your life? And it just only took one application season for me with the medical school application process in Canada to say that it's pretty much going to lead to an international school, which at the time seemed like kind of a downfall. I think that's how everyone really feels. But when you start at an international school, it really does start to pick up and you realize that you are in the right place, especially as you start to get into your clinicals and you start to learn a lot more and become that physician that you really wanted to be.
I can also follow that, being relatively closer to the process than our two intern panelists. So I'm from the US. I'm originally from Philadelphia. And my reasoning is kind of like twofold. I lived in the greater Philadelphia area. I went to university for 4 years in the greater Philadelphia area. I worked in an emergency department in Philadelphia. So I spent a lot of time kind of located in one place. So personally speaking, I wanted a change of environment and a change of pace. It happened to dovetail with like an interest. I always knew I wanted to go to medical school, but kind of an interest in health equity and advocacy and policy. So, I thought to myself, it might be a good, worthwhile experience to go somewhere else and see what it's like. And, come back with like some lessons learned and some kind of different ways to think about it and a change of perspective. So that, in addition to throwing in a bunch of applications within the States, Ireland panned out to be that kind of alternative option. And kind of like Matt said, at first I was a little bummed and thought like, oh, I don't know what I'm kind of doing going overseas, but ultimately kind of fulfilled that goal that I wanted to have that alternative perspective and learn in this like kind of different and enlightening environment. And the goal is to come back. So that's part of the reason why I ended up going overseas to Dublin.
I mean, along the same lines, I know that from the experience of a non-US IMG, I know that a lot of the applicants from that subgroup usually tend to do some years post their medical school. Some do research, some take a few, like 1 or 2 years off before they apply to residency. And if some, I mean, some of those who end up working usually in the same medical center that they did their medical school at, just like my case, where I did 3 years of research after medical school with 4 years of medical school and 3 years of undergrad. So this came up to a total of 10 years in the same place. So I really wanted to try something else, a different experience. And I mean, traveling across the globe was sure, I mean, made sure that I get a different experience. But also one thing that, I mean, there are two things that really made me want to get training, particularly in the US. And the first of which is, I know that there is this governing organization or accreditation body, which is the ACGME, which makes sure that the quality of training over here is adequate and makes sure that every person or every resident that graduates from an ACGME accredited program is a good emergency physician that's going to be able to handle an emergency department. Not to say that residency in other places or in outside the US is not equally as good. And I mean, there are other governing bodies, including the ACGME International Chapter, which I know that there are 10 institutions outside the US that have the ACGME accreditation, but the sheer volume, the different type of experience over here does it for me. This is something that I was looking for. And one thing that I believe that the US and some of the other places around the world that are leading on is wellness, because we all know that residency is a tough time, and this is something that's dear to me, and this is something that is very important to take into consideration when you're an IMG. Residency in itself is hard. Moving and leaving your family and everything and your family that's familiar to you behind to do this huge step is not easy. So you really want to end up in a place that values your wellness. And I mean, I'm sure many of you heard about the medical student, like the residents in one of the medical centers in New York that committed suicide. 3 residents within the same medical center, and all 3 happen to be IMGs. So IMG wellness is an underrated topic that needs to be addressed. And the US is one of the places that's leading in this direction. So the rest of the world is following, but at least I know that over here, I have the lowest risk of burnout. So that these were the main 2 reasons for me.
Thank you. Those were all wonderful reasons to go. And thank you for bringing up some advocacy. Really appreciate that. Us IMGs need to look out for each other. So the next question will be, what are the pros to being an international student?
I can take that. I mean, I've been lucky where I love my program. I got to travel to 2 really amazing places and learn a lot from like 2 vastly different patient populations, healthcare systems, and like cultures. And honestly, I loved every moment of it. And every time I had like an interview, it was really great to be able to talk about it and like kind of share like how much I enjoyed it and getting to talk about, the different, again, like the things I mentioned, like different patients you see, the different like healthcare systems. And I don't know. For me, every time I told somebody like what I did in my program, I still tell people like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome! You got to live there and you got to live there. Tell me about it. Like, how was it?" So kind of we as like IMGs and like being in different places, different countries, um, have this like opportunity to see more where sometimes there is like a good proportion of people I know who went to undergrad in the same place, went to med school in the same place, and never really kind of leave their bubble of like the educational sphere that they're in, and they don't get to experience new like thought processes and different people groups. So it's just all very valuable experience, and um, it's always really good to be able to talk about it. And a lot of people do appreciate um, what we have to offer as IMGs. So
I would definitely echo what Dr. Perth has said completely. I mean, you get to see two different sides of healthcare. Coming from Grenada, you see the side of healthcare where you might not have as much monetary gain as the US has. And then coming to the US, realizing that there's a lot more supplies and resources to take care of patients. And you really take that for granted when you're in this place because it's just readily available, right? Whereas, being in Grenada and having the lack of resources or, just not having access to certain things, it gives you a different perspective. And it's a good perspective because I think everyone should have, everyone should be able to see that side of things as well and, not have adequate resources all of the time. So that was a really great benefit to going to St. George's for me in general. And then just being able to interact with a completely different population, way out of your comfort zone. I think that definitely makes you a better physician in the end as well, being able to relate to a completely different population rather than just being in the US your entire life.
And I just would like to add one thing, which is, the US in general is a very diverse place, and many of the residency programs, if not all, happen to be in areas that are very diverse and have populations from all over the world. And sometimes having a resident with an international background can be a great asset for the program because, honestly, me, like as a patient, I would like to have a physician that I can relate to. And sometimes having someone that shares a culture can give some ease to the patient within, and especially in a very stressful setting like the ER. So, IMGs can be assets for most, if not all, residency programs all over the US.
I love that. That was very well said. It's a good point.
Thank you. All very amazing points. And I'm not even going to try and squeeze in. Those were great. So the next question is, how did you navigate clinical rotations, sub-internships, observer shifts, electives, stuff like that to get through your clinical years? It's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I did obviously it was everything's very difficult with COVID and things have completely changed a lot. I was lucky to be still be able to do an away rotation, but kind of what I did and what a lot of people in my class did is we don't have access to VSLO or VSAS. So which is what like a majority of like US students use to get away rotations. So I basically cold emailed a bunch of programs. I had like a paragraph written up where it's like, hey, I'm so and so, like I'm Bruno from like a third year med student at this and this place. I'm wondering if I can do an away rotation at your place. This is kind of what I'm about. And then I would and then I'd put in the blurb of like why I specifically wanted to do an away rotation at that place. So it does take some legwork, like actually researching it and like having kind of an idea of what you want to do with your career kind of earlier on, because then you can kind of phrase and express it why you want to go to certain places. And then I would include my CV, like my step scores and all those kinds of things, just so that they have everything ready. And it would just increase the chance of them being like, hey, like, let's talk. Or, like, here, let me forward your application to this, instead of just giving like a one paragraph, like, hey, are you offering any away rotations? So you are putting up a lot more work up front, but you actually increase these like chances of success. But I got ghosted by a bunch of programs. I sent probably 15-20 emails and I got like a few responses, and that's all you needed. But I put in like a lot of hours of work, but I guess sometimes it only takes 1 or 2. So
I just have to agree in full force with Dr. Berthas. Like, it's a marathon just trying to get a rotation. He's totally right about COVID throwing a wrench into everything. My experience and probably my advice, regardless of if there's a global pandemic or not, is like exhaust every single avenue that's possibly accessible to you. So we have very spotty access to VSLO. I think like from the beginning when it opened, there were 8 programs that we could apply to. 3 of them are Mayo, and you can only apply to 1 Mayo for EM. So it took like almost 50% of them out of the mix, right? So still apply to those ones if you have access to. None more than 8 never came available on visa. So it was just kind of like you just threw all of those in there and knew that that was one avenue you pursued. But if like whether you have professional connections, like I used to work in an ED, so I literally emailed like every person I ever did a research project with, anybody that they knew that they used to work with, that their old like it didn't matter who I tapped and how long it had been. I just kind of similarly was like very upfront with what I was looking for, included every single piece of detailed information I could, step scores, CV. Well, the blurb about why you want to go to that hospital goes a long way. Like called family who had family connection. I just did kind of everything. Something that I think has been moderately fruitful is also targeting hospitals that are like in your hometown. EM is kind of we'll probably get to the slow question eventually, but like in terms of getting letters, EM has done a great job for being flexible with what types of letters we can use for our ERAS application. So there's a bunch of different types of flows now. So you no longer absolutely need the like e-slow from an EM program with a residency. You can do off service, you can do a program that doesn't have a residency. So there's a ton of options. So if it means rotating at like the community hospital that's like 10 minutes from your house, you can make that work. I think as long as you have some sort of experience in an emergency department that you can speak to or in a hospital setting, then that works really well. And just to circle back, because I know you also talked about observerships and everything, like I'd say for IMGs, like no opportunity is ever wasted. Like observerships are great, like early on in your medical school career. So if you can do them, it's twofold. It's like an opportunity to learn and see something, but it's also a foot in the door when you want to do a rotation later on. And you just have to make the most out of observerships, even if you're doing them like later into your clinical years, but definitely use those as leverage when you can.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of those answers. And I think it's really important to remember that as IMGs, we need to get involved with this process early. You need to start applying to these rotations early, like way early. I'm talking, I started applying because St. George's has connections with certain hospitals, obviously, that we can rotate at. But you start reaching out to those programs like in January or February, like very early in that year that you're planning on doing that rotation. The earlier the better, and you might get rejected from some of those programs saying that, hey, you know, we need to do it like 3 months before the actual rotation. That's fine, that's great. But some of them might say yes, and some of them might let you book it a little bit early and take some of that stress off of you so you can get your actual slow that you need. And then there's also the EMRA match page for the EMRA.com has an actual clerkship subsection as well that you can click onto it. It'll show you all the clerkships across the US, and then you can narrow it down according to if they take IMGs or not too. So you can make a list for yourself of contacts and plan your hospitals that way as well. So just a few things to consider.
Just to add on to that, just because their website says we don't take IMGs doesn't mean that they don't take IMGs. I actually rotated at a place that says on their website we don't take IMGs. So it doesn't hurt to hustle is a key thing. Like take everything with a grain of salt, and like sometimes like if it's like they don't take IMGs, like people just like completely skip over, and you might even have a better chance because you know they're like nobody else applies to it. So just throwing that out there.
And I just wanted to add, basically make use of your contacts to the maximum. I mean, a lot of people really want to help. It's just they don't know that you need the help. So attending physicians, so for those, I mean, that are in medical schools outside the US, many of the attending physicians can be like US graduates that are board certified in emergency medicine. Ask those for help, and also reach out to your peers that graduated from your own medical school that are now in residency programs, particularly in emergency medicine residency programs. They might be able also to help you as well. So make use of your contacts.
I did that. There's actually a person from a med school the year above me who is an EMPGY2 now at my program, and I hit him up all the time. I was like, hey, tell me about like conferences that are going on. Tell me about like the journal clubs that are going on. What's the coordinator's name? Like, who's the best person to contact? And like, it works. So.
And also, whenever you reach out to a program, make sure that the emails are personalized. Don't use generic emails and send it to everyone. They want to know that you are really interested in their program. So make sure you add something that makes them believe you.
And this might be a good time. I know we're kind of jumbling things, but
I love it. Keep it up, fellas.
This is like my number one secret pro tip. Like, get your ERAS picture taken early, and then in every single email signature, put your email signature and put your ERAS picture, so that when ERAS time comes and they pull up your file and they see that picture, they go like, oh, that picture seems so familiar. And they go like, oh yeah, that person sent me an email, versus like remembering the name. So for like the last year, my email signature has been like my ERAS picture and like whatever, like MS Bruno Perthus MS4 and like whatever title I was holding in my EMIG. So
that's a great tip. Everyone, put your pictures in the emails. That's some wonderful info and advice. Thank you all. Some very so much English, hard words. My apologies. How about getting slows? Did that tie into your process and your hustling, or whatever they're accepting nowadays?
I'll take a shot at it. Yeah, and if anybody who has actual experience getting slows wants to follow up, I greatly appreciate it. So the clerkship I'm on now is one that like generates a group e-slow, which I got through VSAS, which was kind of I was very happy about it, but it felt kind of like a fluke because it was like the 1% of places I tried to get rotations at were through VSAS. So like that was a bit of a stroke of luck, but I will say, after talking to like loads of people, lots of like attendings in emergency medicine that are alums from my med school, like mentors that I used to work with, I think the ESLO is still kind of top dog, but like in this kind of climate of emergency medicine, they're very happy to take any type of standardized letter. And now the CORD has developed this exhaustive list of what types of ESLOs you can get and from where. So for instance, like we're all really keen on emergency medicine. So if you have an ability to rotate at a hospital that doesn't have a residency program, like there's a slow for that you can use and still get that standard letter in that option. I think the increase, mostly because of COVID probably, but the increased flexibility has even extended outside of emergency medicine. So there is something called an O slow, which is like other or off service slow, which means you can do crit care, IM, cardiology, like there's other services that you can rotate on, and that letter will like filter in to a slow format, and that'll be submitted into your ERAS, and it has the same exact format as the slow, which is really what program directors at EM programs want to see per what I've been told. So I'm like in the moment, I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm in the moment fishing for like another rotation to do next month. And a lot of what I'm getting offers for is internal medicine, which is not what I want to do. But like, if it's going to work out and I'm going to end up at a good program where I can get a letter, then like, I know the OSLO is there, that I can use that as part of my process, in addition to having the ESLO, the group ESLO that I'll have from Mayo. So I think it goes back to also hustling. Like you can make your application essentially tell whatever story you want it to tell. So if you do end up with like an off-service slow with an OSLO, or one of the sub specialties in like PEM or ultrasound or tox, like you just have to make that story fit what your application says. And that's kind of, you have all of the control and power to do that. So once you have the letter secured, whichever letter it is, just make sure that you have a consistency in the story that kind of makes sense. And I think you should be in good shape from there.
Yeah, Tim touched on a really good point. Like doing one of the subspecialties that puts you still in the emergency department somewhere, even if you're not doing like a proper SLOE, can go a long way, because you're going to be working with people who are going to potentially be interviewing you. So like ultrasound, PEM, tox, and those tend to be less desirable rotations as well. So you may, like, it may happen that you don't get a proper like emergency department rotation somewhere, sub I somewhere, because they're all filled up with a bunch of other students who like are trying to get in a way rotation. But sometimes those tox and ultrasounds and PEM don't fill up. But then that's like almost as good, because you're still meeting kind of the same people who are involved in the process.
I mean, I can argue that the slow is probably one of the, if not the most important part of the residency application. So, I mean, people should really put an effort getting sub I's to get a slowy, and then once you get it, you are lucky, and then you need to make the best out of it. So really, yeah, I mean, the basics, the things that we always hear: come early, don't get to see like patients, don't sit around, ask questions, ask for feedback, ask how you can do better the next time, and stay. Sometimes if it means that if there's some workup that's pending on your patient, and if it means that you have to stay an extra hour, it's fine, like do that, just because this is, I mean, the impression that you get to do in a month, and that could be the program that you're gonna end up doing your residency at. So make sure to leave a good impression there.
And I'd really reiterate, sorry. I'd really reiterate that when you are doing your SLO this year, a lot of people are only going to end up with one SLO before applications open up to program directors. So it's really important that you make that SLO good, because if program directors are only going to have one SLO to base how you did in emergency medicine as a student, it better be a good one. So not sitting in a corner, finding something to do, go help the nurses, go do something in the ER that makes you look like you're doing something. Obviously, don't waste your time, but at the same time, you really need to make sure that you're impressing, right? Because you want to make sure that you give them a good impression of who you are and who you want to be. Do you want to be an emergency medicine physician, or do you want to be someone else, right? And that's the really big thing that kind of stands out, I'm assuming, for program directors and program leadership when they're looking at who they want to take for their program.
And also, I would advise to actually look at what the SLO entails. It's a standardized letter, so they all use the same letter. And if you actually look at it, obviously you need to have knowledge, you need to be good at what you do, you need to be able to see patients and like come up with differentials. But I think none of the categories actually on the SLO evaluate like your actual like clinical knowledge or clinical competency. It's all like, majority of it is like how you interact with people. So what Matthew touched on of like helping nurses out, like being like a personable person without being annoying and getting in the way, is like the major thing. I think that was like for me one of my like biggest strengths of like knowing when to shut up and like things are going crazy and like the emergency department is a crazy place, but like also being interested in like other people and like interesting and like making jokes when you feel like they're appropriate and like working on it. So like if like social skills aren't like your forte, like practice it maybe like with your, I don't know, like that's such a weird like vague concept, but it like definitely goes a long way, because people like, I really felt like your scores and your grades and stuff, like those like screen you out or screen you in, but like whether you get an interview is kind of like a little bit more subjective. That's kind of like your slowies, your personal statement. But then like whether you match somewhere is like based on like how people feel when they talk to you.
These are all great tips. Thank you. Was research important in your application process, or was that further down the list of priorities?
I'll start by saying that I did 3 years of research. So I mean, but this is something that I like to do. It wasn't necessarily something that I did for like the application itself. It's something that I currently do, I will continue to do for as long as I practice medicine. So this is something that I really like. But I do think like having some research can help distinguish you as an applicant. I don't think it's an absolute necessity or, take any precedence over any of the other components of the application. Having it is a good thing, but not having it is definitely not a setback.
Yeah, if like I, on the other hand, did like what I would call the minimum of like research. I had like 4 different things, and it was literally just like a case report, like a editorial like op-ed situation, um, something else. Like I don't even remember. It was like like a poster presentation, but like you should not have like any part of your application that's like bare. So if you only have like one thing, like try to get involved and do a case report, and like if it comes up, and that shows that you're like actively engaged with gaining more knowledge, but also like doing it like a small research project with faculty or with like doctors is a great way to like make a better connection. And then those are people you can like potentially, because you're going to be working clinically with them, especially if you do something like a case report, where then you can ask them for like a letter of recommendation, and they actually have something to write beyond is good in the emergency department, like is like up to date with stuff. It's like, oh yeah, like when I interacted with him on this research project, he was always on time, he was punctual, he had good ideas, he had a good plan. And it like allows your like that letter to have a little bit more of a like multifaceted aspect to it. But I think if you are like your time is so preoccupied with like doing like research that you don't get to like address a lot of the other things in your application, like you just have to kind of like balance what's best. Yeah, and I just didn't like research, so I tried not to do as much.
Uh, I love this question. The job I had before I got into medical school was a research job, and it was like almost 100% like operations and execution. So it wasn't fruitful in the publication sense, but it was fruitful in terms of like experience, which I think is something that I can speak to very comfortably, even if it doesn't show up in my PubMed search. But I think Dr. Sully and Prithis have brought up really good points that I think it's not something you have to do if like you don't love it and have like an actual personal interest and intellectual curiosity. It's a great thing to do with just to have experience in a little bit of everything. And then my caveat to that is consider expanding your idea of what is considered research. It's not all just like bench or like bench to clinic or translational, like it can be, if it has to be clinical, like it could be a chart review, it can be something that's like pretty standard and easy to manage. But if it's not clinical, it can still be something that is related to medicine somehow. Like I'm writing up something that's about medical education right now that's relevant to like medical students and teaching and like the clinical outcomes of doing XYZ. So it doesn't always have to be like the science base, it can be like something else, because medicine has a lot of facets, including education and operations, administration, leadership. These are all like sub areas. So if you have a sub area interest that's not clinical or like quote unquote scientific, there's still research opportunities and publishable opportunities in that venue. But it also doesn't hurt to do like case reports. If you have an interesting case, like you just have to do what Dr. Prithis said and just find a faculty that's willing to support you in doing that and help you along the way. And it can be very fruitful to do so. But yeah, just don't think everything has to be very clinical, because there's a huge plethora of areas in which you can do research.
So what you're saying is be flexible. All of you, research is a flexible topic.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Also, actually, so it depends on the type of program you're applying to. So if you're targeting more academic programs, I mean, these programs are probably looking to see a publication more, and the more the better. If you're looking for a community program, they don't really care if you have research. And I mean, as Bruno said, like, ideally you want to have like all sections of your application filled at least with one thing, but that's not something that they are particularly looking for, community programs, that is.
And I think on the other side of things as well is that if you do have a lot of research and a lot of publications, make sure you can talk about them. Because if you get to that interview and you've forgotten one of your publications and they ask you about it, you're kind of in a knot, right? So make sure if it's not related to emergency medicine, it still shows interest in research. But obviously, if you're applying to emergency medicine, try and do some research in emergency medicine if that's what your interest is. But make sure you can talk about the research that you've done if you include it in your application.
Yeah, none of my research was EM related.
Me neither.
It still counts. Thank you all. So now we're gonna start on the application process. I know we kind of started already, but we're gonna dive into that.
Real quick, Ava, do you
Yeah,
think we
go for it.
knock out some of these questions in the chat before we forget about them?
Yep. Some of them are in the list, reword. But we will definitely hit them up unless I sent you a personal message. Thank you for keeping an eye out. I appreciate the extra set of eyes. Yeah, so application process. How did you apply? Since we're all IMGs, was it the same process that the US and Canadian med students go through, or was it different?
I mean, different in the sense of like we have to go through a different accreditation body. There's a couple more hoops to jump through. Hopefully you all have like support at your like places that can help you like figure out the ECFMG. Otherwise, there's like websites you can definitely look up. Definitely something gets started early on. There's like a lot of hoops to jump through, and some of that stuff does take like a couple weeks to come back for like each individual step, which can add up to a lot of time quickly. In terms of like actual application, I think somebody asked us like, how many programs did I apply to? A lot. And this is like the unfortunate thing, and like sometimes like I shock people when I tell them how many programs I apply to, but like it's just like the unfortunate reality and the way that like my classmates who applied EM with me and I like saw it. It's like, yes, we may have to spend a couple more $1,000s on applications again, which sucks, but if we've already spent like X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans to get here, what's really another $1,000 or a couple $1,000s to like get a spot? For the person asking Helena, a lot is like, I think I applied to 135, 140. But I had classmates who applied to every single program, and they ended up with like less than 10 interviews between like 6 and 8 interviews. Yeah, they ended up matching. So it's like that's like the thing about it. It's like if there's like that toxic like Reddit spreadsheet and you can look and there's some people like, yeah, I applied to like 30 programs and I got like 28 interviews, and it's like that's unfortunately not like the reality for us. So I would say I had approximately like a little more than a 10% yield, which, and like kind of comparing like my applications to like my classmates, I was like slightly above average. But like my class probably had around the like 5 to like 10-12% yield. So do with that information as you please. But a lot of like clerkship coordinators and like places online will tell you like, oh, even as an IMG, only applies to like 100. And this is like very much like my personal opinion. I would like recommend against it, unfortunately. And you kind of have to like see for yourself and know what's kind of best. But I wanted to feel safe and get a position. So.
Yeah, along the same lines, it's really important to know that, as an IMG, you are not in a power position. So, wishful thinking, this is not the time for wishful thinking during the residency application, because when it's too late, you can't go back and redo it. So I suggest overdo it and then drop interviews, or I mean, you are very lucky if you end up dropping interviews, but drop interviews or don't rank certain programs, but overdo it. I personally applied to 119 programs. Thing is, I would have loved to apply to more programs, but as a non-US IMG, and this is something that's a bit kind of different for non-US IMGs, there are institutions that do not sponsor visas, and we cannot come to the institution if that particular institution does not provide a visa. So it's very important for non-US IMGs, and there are multiple websites like Frida and Residency Explorer that really tell you which programs sponsor visas and which don't. Another way to determine which programs sponsor visas is to look at the residents, and you might find out a lot about the culture of the institution. And the third way to do it is to email the program coordinator. I probably sent like 50 emails to program coordinators asking them, do you sponsor a visa or do you not? I mean, I probably got like 30 emails back, and that removed probably 20 programs from my list. So make sure to figure out which programs sponsor visas, but apply broadly and everywhere and to every part of the US.
And somebody asked that as well. Like, did I apply to places that didn't have any IMGs currently? Like, yeah, of course. Like, if you applied only to places that had IMGs, I think the list would be smaller that you'd be applying to. But I got interviews from places that, looking back in the last like 10, 15 years, never had an IMG, but I still had an interview and I was like well received. It's just like kind of what you make of it and like what you make of your application. But I don't think it makes any sense to not apply to a place that doesn't take IMGs. That has not taken IMG. Either way, like the point is like apply to those places, because like if you have the funds to do it, which is unfortunately also a limiting factor, and like I think is a really crappy part, where IMGs already have to pay more for a lot of things, and now we get like shortchanged on this as well. But if you can do it, like it might be worth the investment.
I just want to add that I'm technically like the first IMG my program takes, so that, I mean, gives hope to others. I mean, I got just like Bruno, interviews at places that never took IMGs before, so programs might surprise you. You never know. So apply everywhere.
Just to speak to like preparation for applications that I'm going through literally right now, this is another thing that starting early is a huge benefit for. I think, like Mohammed said, like Frida is there and they have a list of residencies. I know Emra Match also has a list of residencies, and you can filter by like percent IMG, whether that's as up to date as possible, who knows. But I think you just have to put in all of the extra work being an IMG, which means utilizing those like easy databases. And it also means looking up the residencies to see if there are any IMGs there. And it means emailing like your school's like career office or whoever has access to data about who matched to certain places in the country you want to match to, and then probably reaching out to those people and like looking up where there are attendings who went to your med school that work at X place. And I think once you have like a really, I have to tell you, it's like exhausting and backbreaking, but once you have a really, really like long list, it makes it a lot less daunting of the like, oh, how many places is normal to apply to, because you have a huge range, which will include the places that like traditionally do take IMGs and like even places that don't, but seem to be kind of flexible. And just to kind of, I mean, I haven't matched yet, but just to kind of add to the apply literally anywhere that you'd want to go and beyond. I've heard of, you know, people from my school who have applied to absolutely every place that took an IMG in the last like 10 years, and then like maybe 2% of the places they applied to have never taken an IMG, and they had been like rejected from places that have taken IMGs like for years, and they got interviews at places that had never had IMGs before. So it just speaks to kind of being exhaustive about the list and like applying broad, but also applying smart. So like with all of that effort and all of that looking comes a lot of additional work to make sure that your application also looks tantalizing to that program. So if you're going to throw in a bunch of general applications to places just to play the numbers game, like PDs like are a little, they've been doing this for a long time, and they can catch on to the fact that, oh, do you really want to be here, which is essentially the question that they're trying to answer by like going through your application and interviewing you. So if you're doing it for the sake of having numbers and playing the numbers game, you might also end up unsuccessful. So it just means like doing a little bit of extra work on like really researching every program, finding something to say about that program in your application that speaks to them, that says, okay, I really do want to be here, and that will only increase your chances. But again, it goes with doing all of that heavy lifting early on and starting soon and kind of following through all the way to the bitter end.
Take notes on everything, every program that you like have a like fact about, you like write that jot down, because come interview season and you do get an interview from that place, like awesome, you have like the stuff to remember by, or like you had like emailed the program director like a year ago but you like don't remember. But if you have written down, you can take a look and you can mention like during an interview like, oh yeah, like I emailed so and so who was a resident there, or so and so, and like I really like the response it gave me, and it shows kind of like a longitudinal thing. But just like a side tangent on not having a general applications, like programs want to interview people that they think will actually attend their program. Like they don't want spots to go unmatched, they don't have to sew people, so they will try to find people who actually want to be there. Like there's a couple times during interviews where I was asked like, essentially like, do you actually want to be here, like why would you apply to this area when like you're from here and you've never been here and you have no connections here. So just something to keep in mind.
This is all great advice. I'm even taking notes, so thank you, gentlemen. Were there any obstacles that you all faced during the application process or during residency or during med school that non-IMGs face? Any additional testing, any additional hoops to jump? And if so, please elaborate. Thank you.
I think we can all, everybody that's a panelist, everybody that's an attendee can probably have their own list of things to do. Of course, there's like ACGME. We've touched on a lot of the things that kind of like are tough, getting ghosted by programs, like having, to pay extra and like being seen kind of like as being filtered, like having to get filtered in instead of like filtered out. I don't like to dwell on those things too much because I think we all kind of know a lot of the struggles, but I like the question a lot better about what are the good things about being an IMG, because that's the stuff you talk about during interviews, right? Like a lot of people aren't gonna like ask you, or you're gonna want to expand for like 5 minutes or like 10 minutes and like quote unquote complain about like how much it sucks sometimes to be an IMG. But like if you have like good reasons and like happy reasons and like you have like a good explanation for things, like I think that goes leaps and bounds further.
I want to add that sometimes you want to have a tough skin when applying and when interviewing. You might find someone like some interviewers actually do stereotype you. Some interviewers let out some microaggressions, and I mean, by definition, these are, I mean, some microaggressions aren't really intentional. This person is not out there to get you, they didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but your feelings end up getting hurt in the middle of the interview. So you want to make sure, maybe you're not going to rank this program on top of your list, but again, you're not in a position of power. You're probably going to rank this program maybe in the lower third of your list, but just make sure to control your reactions during interviews. Some people feel they need to shut it down like right on the spot. Some people might appreciate that, and it's a moment of growth to both the interviewer and the interviewee, but others might take offense. So you just need to like be careful treading this aspect and know when to speak up and when to basically let it go. So ideally, in an ideal world, you should never let it go, but it's not an ideal world. So
I mean, as future EM doctors, we all like need to deal with like dealing with their emotions and like having people not communicate to us in the way that sometimes we want to, and then just us having to choose and pick our battles. And this kind of goes back to the like social aspect of like applications, like practice like your interviews. Like I had like the benefit of our program set it up where we had an EM doctor like do practice interviews with us, and it showed a lot of valuable stuff for me. And then like my roommate, he also he actually matched at Lincoln where Matthew is currently in EM. We like sat down and we asked each other like interview questions and like pretended, because like sometimes we like throw a wrench into each other's like questions just to see how the other person would react, because it's just good practice for interviews and for life.
Yeah, and I think if there's anyone watching this that is just considering medical school right now and considering the IMG route as well, it's a difficult process. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a tough route to go through. But I mean, if you want to be a physician in the end, it's going to be, you know, one of your only routes, right? I think IMGs are a little bit more gritty in that way as well. We really like to push forward, especially with the random changes that happen. But all in all, the majority of us make it, and makes us better physicians in the end. And just to give people a reminder that OET is a thing this year, just to remind everyone that if you haven't signed up for it, you need to do it, right? So, and as much as of a pain as it is, it's still something we need to do, another hoop, and then you'll eventually get there.
And then I actually wrote a position statement on how ridiculous the OET is last year for AAM RSA. Go ahead and read it, spread it around. It's good stuff.
That's my reminder to like do my 1 day of pre-prep for the OET that I have to take in the next couple of weeks. But I mean, we've talked kind of at length throughout kind of about some of the challenges and the goods and the bads. I think something that has given me some solace in the process and made me feel less anxious, because I think that comes with whether you're an IMG or not, kind of being in medicine and being in medical school and trying to get to the next step and finding the right fit. All of those things can kind of be quelled if you have good mentorship. And I don't mean just like the person at your med school that's supposed to help you like navigate how to apply and ping you when like ECFMG is like doing something that you don't really get and they never answer your phone call. Like I'm talking about like people in the specialty or close to the specialty. So like actual attendings, like, or residents, like people that can guide you through the process, whether they are also IMGs or not. And building that rapport, I mean, it goes a long way for many other reasons, but it also gives you somebody that you know, like, will answer your email and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do at this stage. What did you do? What do students that are, you know, rotating with you or students at the med school that, you know, you teach are doing? Like, am I on the right track? I'm thinking of this. So like, there's a lot of richness in mentorship that I found really beneficial, just having that sounding board. And then also like EM people, I think, are fantastic. So they usually have the soothing calm of like, listen, it's actually going to be okay. Like, you're in a good spot. Like, you just have to do this, or let me help you with that. Like, send this to me, or I'll connect you with somebody that I know will be able to help you with that. So usually you get kind of a soothing, calm, relaxing response on the back end. So I think identifying some people that can help you throughout, like that are outside of your med school administration, will definitely go a long way in quelling some of these concerns, whether you're starting your medical training process or whether you're going into the ERAS cycle like Matt and I, and like trying to figure out the next steps.
All great points. Thank you. Be optimistic, be proactive, get everything done early. Thank you. Quick question. What are your opinions on the combined residency programs? Did any of you apply to them? Did any of you match to them? So like EM, anesthesia.
I didn't apply. I have minimal experience with them. I like wrote a brief, basically review article on combined emergency medicine residency programs. But the only thing I want to say is like state the facts, and I have those written down in front of me. So basically, these aren't many programs. So EM anesthesia, there are 2 positions, 7 for EM/FM, 31 for EM/IM, and 8 for EM peds. And that's a total of 48 positions, 2 of which those were the 2021 data for last year, basically. And 2 of those positions were taken by IMGs, one by a US IMG and the other by an non-US IMG. So this is to say that based on purely the data, it's not the most welcoming field of emergency medicine or part of emergency medicine for IMGs, just because of its pure competitiveness and the fact that these are new and haven't been there for a long while. And part of the way that programs take more IMGs is the more they get to know IMGs, they start taking more people from the same medical school or the same area. So it's basically through connections. I would assume like with time, as more positions open and they get to see more IMGs and have more experiences with IMGs, they will be more likely to take IMGs. At this point, it shouldn't be a backup plan for people who are applying to emergency medicine.
I have to agree 100%. Just to plug again how important mentorship is, I literally had this thought a month ago of like, increase your chances, apply to every combined program, which I then figured out there are so few. And I just had to ask somebody in attending, my old boss, and I said, is this a good idea? And I mean, it came out essentially in our conversation to say, if it's something that you really want to do and you can speak to really wanting to do that combined program, yes, it's probably a good idea to like throw it in, whether it's EM/FM or EM/IM. But if it's again something that you like just are trying to do to increase your numbers and trying to match anywhere that has an EM of some sort, it probably, like, again, PDs aren't fooled, and like admissions like committees for residency programs aren't fooled by that. So I think it's something that you have to know you really want to do and have like a really solid reason why you want to have this like double boarded 5-year or 6-year residency as one of your top options. So just to speak to me personally, I was telling my boss in this meeting, I said, my entire CV says emergency medicine. My entire personal statement only says emergency medicine. Everything that I speak to is like emergency medicine. So am I now going to start trying to figure out a way to make it say emergency and internal medicine? Am I going to change all of these aspects? Because I think that also isn't going to fool anybody either. It's creating more work for me, but probably with no gain. So if there's no actual genuine interest in IM or FM, and the kind of juxtapose or the touch point between that and emergency medicine, you're probably not going to be able to come up with a convincing story. And it goes back to like really being honest in your ERAS application and what story that tells. Because if it doesn't tell the story that matches what that combined program is selling, then I think your efforts are going to be fruitful or fruitless rather. So, but I have to say there are some really great programs that are combined. So if you really want to do something like that, like, that's great. And I think you can absolutely speak to that if you're interested in it. But if you kind of are EM, like straight and narrow without any deviations, like you're better off just increasing the number of EM solitary programs you apply to and go that route.
That's some good points. Thank you so much. To the residents, I have a quick question. Did you match at any of the sub-Is that you rotated it at? So you did.
I didn't. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Mohammed.
I just want to say that I did, well, like one of my sub-Is was at UT and I matched here, so.
I did not. I did apply to do an away rotation at University of New Mexico. And I think that was like something that probably helped me get an interview because it showed my interest early on, which I don't think is like a strategy you should use. It's just like a random side fact. But there's kind of 2 schools of thought on this, like especially in my like EMIG group when we talked about this, was like doing an away rotation if you have the option at like your top choice program. Essentially, like some people are the thought process of like, yes, it gets your foot in the door, you're like, you get to know the people, like you're more likely to get an interview, but at the same time as like, especially if it's like your first away rotation and like doing your top choice program, like you're not going to perform as well doing your first away rotation. And this is actually something really funny, and like I don't think anybody like that I've talked to has had this happen to them. But the program I did an away rotation at, that wasn't my home program, I actually didn't get an interview from them, which was like a really weird situation. Everybody I talked to has thought that was really weird. And I double checked my ERAS. I definitely applied to them. And like the evaluations after the end of my shifts were good. So I don't know. It was just a weird year, but I did short and like long and short of it is I didn't end up matching where I did the sub-I.
So 50-50 shot here with that one. Noted. We are at 9 o'clock. There are more questions coming in. If you all have to go, feel free to hop off. Whoever has an extra 5-10 minutes, please stick around to answer any more questions that there may be. But for those who need to hop off, are there any final messages that you'd like to convey to our audience?
I have a couple that I really wanted to say during this panel, which are, the first is, please make sure that whatever program you end up in is a program that's going to make you feel welcome, and it's a place that you're going to feel like you belong and a part of a family. I'm personally lucky over here. I had the chance to do a sub-I, to meet the people, to get an experience of the community as a whole. And this is a really important aspect that sometimes people with, during the stress of the application process, tend to forget or oversee. But I can't stress how important this is. And I hear like horrible stories from friends or other people, like blogs and over the internet. So please make sure that when you're ranking programs, to look for a program that's going to make you feel like you're part of a family. And the other thing is, this is something that people need to be aware of, programs aren't always honest. So when it comes to post-interview communication, this is an extremely tricky thing. It's very nice to hear back from programs, and you're probably, I mean, IMGs are impressive people. You are probably going to hear from a few programs that will tell you that they really need you. And I have a few friends that ended up not matching in a very twisted way because of that. So please make sure to not let your rank list be in any way affected by the post-interview communication. And don't go around and let every program think that you're ranking them number one. I mean, some people do it. I'm completely against it, because it's such a small community. These people meet over conferences. If this slips out, your reputation, I mean, you don't want this reputation to be out in the world that you love the most, which is emergency medicine. So make sure to just be courteous when it comes to the application process, and be careful when it comes to post-interview communication.
Yeah, I definitely got a couple love letters from programs, telling me like, oh, we like really liked you, ranked you really highly. And it didn't change my rank list at all, because it doesn't matter. Like, the algorithm is set up in a way, no matter what conspiracy theories you hear, it's like set up in a way, actually won a Nobel Prize in economics, like the algorithm that's based off of. It's called the happy marriage algorithm. You can look it up. But it doesn't matter like whether like this program, like you suddenly move them up, like if they did really rank you high enough, and then you will match there, whether you put it at like 12 or 1. So it makes a lot more sense just to like Mohammed was saying, like match the places that you actually want to match at.
I might jump in, since I'm going through it right now and I'm thinking of like advice that I've gotten that's been really good, which is actually just like echoing what Noah and Mohammed said, which is like, Matt, like go somewhere where you know that you'll be happy and you'll feel at home and like family wise. So however, I mean, I'm like kind of broken recording myself, but like sound like make your ERAS application tell the story about like you, not like a story that you're trying to sell to a specific program, because like that may not end up being as fruitful as you think. But if you kind of are honest about who you are and what your interests are, there are numerous programs that probably dovetail with your personal interests in a way, and you can bring that out in your ERAS application. And then there's like one thing I would suggest to do with a caveat, which is look into or consider personalizing your personal statements. Like I've been going to like tons of virtual residency fairs, which like they are like in love with it. And it really speaks to that kind of what Bruno was saying earlier, like you really want to be in that program because you know what it's about and there's something specific in that personal statement to that program that makes them know like, yeah, that person not only did their research, but that story tracks with everything else that we're seeing in their statement and in their ERAS application. But be cautious about the number of places because there's so many programs and there's so many types of programs and there's so many like little things that you can try and personalize every which one. You will like burn yourself out and run out of time if you try and do everything like that. So if you are like thinking of like your top 3 or top 4 programs and there's something that like you are so connected with that you feel like is going to put that statement in kind of like a I guess in a unique category, and it fits your story, like absolutely personalize it to that sense. But there's like what I think I have a spreadsheet, it's like 153 EM programs that take IMGs. So like imagine writing 153 individualized personal statement, like it's not possible. So zone in on the places where you know you want to be and absolutely personalize those, because those are probably going to help you at least get into the interview stage. But that's something that like I'm doing a lot of right now, and it's been super helpful.
I have to agree with them. I can't stress this enough. I personalized 6 of my personal statements. I got interviews at 5 of those, and I was waitlisted for that 6th program. So it does make a huge difference. So personalize, like pick 4 or 5, 6 programs, like have them, like have these personal statements personalized and have these programs. I mean, these should be programs that you really want to be at, not programs that look good on paper. So
yeah, I did that as well. And on the topic of like telling programs, you know, like they're your top choice, I personally did do that with one program. I chose the one program that I really loved and felt like the one that I really wanted to be at. I wrote a personal statement just specific to them with specific reasons that like were beyond the superficial of what you could read on a website. And then I sent an email to the program director before ERAS, or like right after ERAS submitted. And then after my interview, like, and then shortly after ERAS closed. So you can do it, and like I think it really does make a difference. Like Mohammed said, like he's proof to show statistically that it does work. You just pick your fights.
Yeah, I think I'm free to stay for more questions afterwards for a few more minutes. But I think one last nugget of knowledge for everyone. Everyone on here is obviously come leaps and bounds, matching into university programs, of course. But I can't tell you how many times, not just from medicine faculty and things like that, that they tell you that you're just an IMG and you probably shouldn't try that. You shouldn't match into that competitive program because you probably don't stand a chance, right? Well, I think we've probably overcome that boundary. And if people are telling you that, I mean, it's just another hoop to jump through, right? If you believe that, then that's fine. But those of us that really want to push for the stars and everything like that, you're not gonna listen to that, because you will definitely hear that from a lot of people that you trust, people that you want knowledge from. But it's just another hoop to overcome. And I believe that if you guys actually want to match into that program of your dreams, you definitely can if you try for it.
I just dropped in the chat my email and my Twitter handle. So if any one of you guys wants to reach out, please do. I mean, I would love to help. I don't mind setting a meeting, a phone call, DMs on Twitter, WhatsApps, or text messages. Please feel free to text me, and I would love to help out.
That's very kind of you as well. I put my email in there as well. Same sentiment goes. I think that's one of the beautiful things about EM. You'll find that people do actually care, and like medicine, like they do care and they want to help you out. And like we all 4 or 5 of us panelists wouldn't be here if we didn't want to help out in some way or another. So here's your chance. Like practice that social skills, or like ask a question. Like even if you have like no interest in the places we want to go, or like you don't really have a question, but it doesn't hurt to practice those social skills, which is going to be like my magical tip besides the year aspect here. So I'm actually going to head out. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to be here. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, actually. But feel free to email me, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
You might want to send your messages to the rest of the attendees, because some of your messages.
Perfect.
Thank you, doctors. I know you all have a busy schedule, but thank you for taking the time and reaching back to help the next generation of EM residents come through. For Tim and Matthew, Tim, if you're staying, feel free to. If you're not,
yeah, I'm happy. If there's questions, like throw them at me.
There are a few questions coming in. How many sub-Is do you guys have scheduled, or do you plan on doing?
So I'm currently on 1, but I'm trying to schedule 2. I think I don't want to get too into weeds, because there's a lot of conversation about how to like kind of work this, because currently there's guidance that you should do one away rotation per specialty. So I think that speaks, some people are really paying close attention to that, some people aren't. If you're at a medical school that has a home EM rotation, which you probably won't be if you're an IMG, I think you have a little bit more flexibility to play with, because it means like you can't get a letter from your home institution. You have to get at least 1 or 2 letters from somewhere else. So if you're really EM bound, no one would like shake their finger at you for doing 2 away rotations wherever you can find them. So I think like from what I'm hearing from a lot of attendings, it's like, hey, if you do 2, it's in your best interest. And again, speaking to like the types of slows, you can be flexible with what type of slow you're gonna get. But sorry, that's my trauma pager. I don't have to go for the trauma, but so I would say like 2 is happy medium. I honestly have been hearing like with COVID and everything, the trend with program directors and clerkship directors is like they're actually quite happy with 2. They are a little bit tired of the days where they get like 3 or 4 or 5, or like 3 and like 1 narrative letter. Like I think they're very happy to do 2, but like I think Matt said earlier, a lot of people will be applying with 1 and will be just fine with the 1 that they have. But the ultimate goal is it's not the quantity, it's the quality. So if you do have only 1, absolutely knock it out of the park. However you can do that. If you have the ability to do 2, knock both of them out of the park. That's kind of where I'm at with clerkships and sub-Is.
Yeah, I completely agree with Tim. I'll be applying with 1 slow, one slow and 1 subspecialty slow in ultrasound, and then 1 personal letter. I'll be taking my 2nd EM rotation in October. So I'll be applying, well, not applying late, but using that slow a little bit late in the process, which is fine, right? Having the 1 slow though before you apply is really, it seems like it's pretty crucial to program directors at this point. Last year, I mean, it was iffy just because of COVID, but things are starting to return to normal-ish, right? But they're going to be happy probably with that 1 slow. If you can get 2, hey, more power to you. That's great. I had a hard time doing that. So if the one is probably going to be fine, but yeah, make sure you knock that out of the park. And I think there was another question from Helena that had asked, do you guys have any idea of how, yeah. So to base how your slow kind of goes, you can't, they're not going to just like hand you the slow and be like, here's how you did, right? What you need to do is you need to ask for constant feedback. After your rotation is done for the day, go up to the resident that you were taught or that you were with and be like, how did I do? Like, give me some feedback of like what I could do like better, what you thought I did good, what I can build on for the rest of the rotation. And by the end of it, you'll have a general sense of how you did, right? They're not going to give you a percentage. They're not going to be like, yeah, you got a top 10% slow, no problem, right? They're not going to say that. They're going to be like, you know what, you were a really, really good student. You worked your butt off. And we really appreciated everything that you did, which is kind of general advice, but the more feedback you ask for, the better of an idea you'll get with how you did with that slow.
Just chime in because feedback, sorry, I'll be quick. I have to agree with Matt, like feedback is super crucial and really important. And you have to wield it very carefully because once you ask for that, it's not just about asking for the feedback, like you have to do something with it, you know? So two things that I've got, now that I have retaught myself how to use Epic on my first 2 shifts, like day 3, I came in, introduced myself to the entire team, nurses, like techs, the attending and the resident. And the resident asked me like, what do you want to learn today? And like going in with something that you want to get out of the shift is really good because it means like they know you're prepared to learn something. It's a very discreet thing. And if they have it on that day, like you'll absolutely be shown it. And it's not kind of you, like we said earlier, like sitting in the corner trying to figure this out or doing your thing and not really being engaged. So I would say go into the shift with a learning goal, whether you achieve it or not, ask for feedback on the end. And then like, as tired as you will be, like go home and like review the thing that you got feedback on. Like go home and like, if there's something that the consultant told you you missed or something that you like couldn't remember in a presentation or for your workup, like go back and learn it again. Because unlike other services, EM is shift-based. So for instance, I have 15 shifts over the course of 30 days, and there's no guarantee that I'll see the same consultant twice. So if I have the opportunity to, the last thing I want to do is like make the same mistake I made on day 3 on day 23. But since you like don't necessarily know who you're going to be working with, it's best that you like just consistently review everything. So whoever you're meeting either for the first time or the 5th time, you're always on the ball and you can continue to like improve and just get closer and closer to, like Matt said, what verbally sounds like that top 10% slow, but will just be kind of like, you know, you've been really helpful today. I thought you did this, and this really well. And that's kind of where you want to go to gauge. But, you know, if in a perfect world, yeah, we'd be right sitting over the clerkship director's shoulder, reading what they say about us. But there's ways for you to like get to that level just by like being active and engaged and prepared.
I just wanted to add that sometimes during the interviews, like one of the interviewees might slip some clues about your slow. Like in one of the interviews, like someone actually told me about like my slows. So that was during like the beginning of the interview season, which I'm hoping that everyone gets amazing slows. So it gives you a boost of confidence throughout the interview season. And I just don't want anyone to underestimate that, like the power of a really strong and good narrative letter of recommendation. So if you have someone that really knows you very well, a mentor that you have been working with for maybe a year, 2 years now, that's able to really attest to what kind of person you are, get a narrative letter of recommendation and can get you a long way. So don't, I mean, as slow is really important, but it's not the only aspect of the application.
Alrighty, and since Mohammed, you're still here, I'm going to ask you a question that was given prior for residents. Are you, as an international person who came to the US, are you able to live off your salary on your in the US? This was a concern of multiple people.
Yeah, I mean, It depends on the area you're living at. Toledo is relatively cheap, but then generally speaking, the salaries are adjusted in a way that you are able to, for sure, at least make it. In some places, you're able to save a bit of money and use it to travel all over the states. But then in other places, you maybe with an opportunity to moonlight, which is not an option for people on a visa, but for US IMGs, it is an option. So you'll be able to get extra cash, but the salary is definitely enough to basically live very comfortably.
Thank you. It was a common concern shared by multiple people. Wonderful. And I think we hit most of the questions. Do you guys want to give any lasting send-offs? Yes, Tim.
One thing I wanted to hit, because I know Bruno answered in the chat, but somebody asked about like getting connections and kind of struggling with connections. This is kind of a hard thing to do, but like Mohammed said, EM is that's like the trauma helicopter. I live across the street from the hospital, so it's every like 20 minutes there's a helicopter coming in. So I apologize for that. But like Mohammed said, yeah, like reaching out to EM is a really small world, so kind of like reaching out and kind of getting feelers out is really good. Like Bruno really hit the nose on the head. Like attending conferences, particularly this year, it can be really beneficial. And maybe shameless plug, like get involved with like RSA at AAEM and like MRO through ASAP, and like SAEM has like a residence group. So like any way that you can get connected with people, like IMG or not, EM people like to help. Like they're a great bunch. They're really friendly. They're really willing to help. So the more time you get to rub elbows with people, whether it's at conferences or whether it's attending like residency fairs, just keep your eye out for any opportunity to like at least hear from these people. And like Bruno said, like always take notes. So if you end up like kind of falling in love with the program and you have the opportunity to attend a conference with someone who's there, like listen to what they say about the program and reach out to them afterwards and ask questions. Something that I came to late in the game, but I'm going to shamelessly plug because I'm addicted now, is Twitter. I did not know there was this like massive like medical community on Twitter that's very active, that's like both like hilarious and academic and really engaging. So I would 100% say if you don't have a Twitter handle, like get a Twitter handle and just like get involved with Med Twitter in any way that you can, because a lot of great information goes up. Yes, Mohammed, use the hashtag EMBound. Like people will retweet you that you've never met before, that you've never heard of them. Like just knowing that you're interested in that is a good way. And like, right, using technology brings everyone all around the world much closer together. So you're definitely able to increase the number of connections you might be able to get if you're just kind of peeking into people's Twitters and retweeting stuff and finding things that you're interested in that space. So I would 100% have to plug that because it's actually been really beneficial for me, and I didn't expect it to be as useful. I thought it was going to be like Instagram where I just waste time scrolling for hours, but actually like sometimes I learn something, and best case scenario, I like get in contact with like someone at a program and have a direct connection with them that we can talk really casually. And it's a little bit easier than like cold emailing, because like emails can go unread, and EM people get a lot of emails and EM people don't always check emails, but the Twitter active ones, like they do check their DMs. So definitely get yourself on Twitter if you're already not.
I mean, program directors are lurking there and they do answer your DMs if you message them. So make sure to like get a Twitter.
Yeah, and I mean, you can also sign up for the mentor-mentee programs that both EMRA and AEM RSA have, where they'll actually physically hook you up with someone that you are most interested in. If you're interested in emergency medicine, or you want, let's say, like EMS for a future career, or you want critical care for a future career, you can sign up for mentor-mentee programs and have a direct connection with someone in your field of interest. So I would really take advantage of that, because there are people that want to help. There are residents that are just starting out that want to help. because we realize that, well, not me because I'm still a student, but I think the PGY ones definitely realize that it was a difficult process to go through, and the easier that they can make it on someone else that's going through that as well, the better.
And one last thought, basically the idea of having a contact, and the word contact can be haunting for many IMGs. And I know it might feel like isolating when you feel like you don't have contacts. So make use of the emergency medicine, the big emergency medicine family, and IMGs within this family. Just reach out to us. We really want to help. We can put you in contact with the right people. We met each other throughout the interviews or preparing for the residency application, or people from my school that went to a program that you might be interested in. So we will help build your contacts. This is a thing that is a work in progress. You can always work on developing and building contacts. So if you don't have any contacts today, next week you can have 2 more contacts, and then in a month you can have 8 or 10. So this is a work in progress. Never give up on building connections.
Thank you, gentlemen, for all your time, efforts, advice. I was taking notes the whole time, so I appreciate it. If anyone who is participating tonight has any questions, feel free to email our participants. I will also throw mine in the chat for funsies. Our next AAEM RSA panel is on how to stand out as a med student on August 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So everything we talked about tonight kind of flows into that. And if you need any reiteration, please join us. Otherwise, thank you all for your time. Please stay safe out there. Have fun, and I hope to meet every single one of you in person soon.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Good morning, good evening, good wherever you are.